the idea came about to do the ride kind of just from a joke. We were both planning on going to the actual Winter Classic because we're both huge Flyers fans, and we were discussing ways to actually get to Boston. Went through Google Maps, found out how long it would take to drive, if there were any train options, and then I just jokingly entered into Google Maps to get the walking directions and found out that it would take about 6 days of nonstop walking. And I made the joke of just, hey, let's walk there. And then that kind of slowly snowballed into, let's do a bicycle ride maybe, we'll do it for charity. And then I believe it was Pat's idea to say, like, hey, let's do a tandem bicycle. We actually didn't get the tandem bike until 2 days before we left for the trip. So we had 1 day to practice. We got back from picking the bike up, and Pat decides to hop on, and he's like, oh, let's go. And he takes off, and he's like, oh, this is easier than I thought it would be. It's just like riding a normal bike. And I'm standing 50 feet away where I started. I'm like, it's because I'm not on the bike, Pat. You're just riding it by yourself. So we had some interesting times on that first night trying to figure out how to ride it around his neighborhood.
We also wanted to take a day on the Perkiomen trails out by where Drew lives, but it had just snowed and they hadn't plowed the trails. So we ended up at a bus terminal, and they had a bus loop, and we just rode around the loop for a few hours, and that's the main practice we got on the tandem. If you're going to ride a tandem bike, become very familiar with how exactly to ride a tandem bicycle. It turns out it's very different from a normal bicycle in the way you ride it. The difference between riding a regular bike and a tandem is mostly about balance. There's a lot more weight sitting on a tandem bicycle, and it's just something you have to get used to. Also, you have to pedal at the same rate as the other person on the bike. So even things like starting to ride is the hardest thing. You both have to start at the same time, shift your weight the same way, things like that. When it finally went from a joke to the two of us at the Spectrum on a Sunday morning, leaving for Boston, it was quite the experience.
Yeah, there were definitely a few moments going up Broad Street where I was just thinking, like, I guess we're really gonna do this.
You remember the part where we made a wrong turn and ended up on an entrance ramp to Route 1?
Yeah, the first day we had a few navigational problems trying to get the kinks out of the taped on the back directions, and we made a wrong turn and ended up on a major highway, and we knew that we only had maybe like a half a mile, but it was also probably one of the most dangerous crossover merge points on the Route 1 highway. And
I was all for cutting across 3 lanes of traffic and getting to the exit we needed, but you know,
I was not. I was ready to knock him out, put him over my shoulder, and walk back up the on-ramp so we didn't have to cross into traffic. But luckily, we called our trail car, and they came and picked us up, put us back on the right road, and then we continued on to Staten Island.
Yeah, and it seemed like on the whole way up, that's when we were coming up with all these promotional ideas. Like on the second day when we left Staten Island, we rode by a woman who was walking her dog, and she asked, what we were doing. We were both wearing Flyers gear on a tandem bike in Staten Island. And we explained it to her, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if we had pamphlets to hand out? So we actually had our trail car put together some pamphlets, and then we handed those out for the second half of the trip. We only got 1 flat tire the whole way.
The only thing that's kind of unfortunate is the tire that we blew happened to be in an absolutely awful part of Trenton. So it's definitely a little sketchy is how I would describe it. So that leads into something I would recommend to people doing something like this. Look at the route you're taking. We had a couple instances where we just took us through the worst parts of whatever city we were driving through at the time.
Yeah, when we went through Manhattan, it was great. They had separate bike lanes and even separate bike signals, traffic lights for bicyclists. But once we crossed out of Manhattan, we went into the Bronx, and that was a completely different experience.
Yeah. Another unfortunate thing is since we're using walking directions, we figured it would just be, the shortest distance and avoid highways. But apparently there are places where you can walk, but you can't ride. The directions actually had us going through the zoo. They weren't too, amicable to the idea of letting us drive a tandem bicycle through their zoo. So we had to go around the outer fence of that. Toughest part of the ride, I would definitely have to say, and I'm sure you would agree, is the hills of Connecticut, the ever uphills of Connecticut. Normally, there's the old adage, what goes up must come down. Apparently Connecticut doesn't believe in that because we'd, spend 20, 30 minutes laboring up a hill just to turn a corner and see more hill rather than, what you would expect to be a downhill on the other side.
To try to put it in a little bit of perspective, our first day from Philadelphia to Staten Island was 80 miles. And our second day from Staten Island to
Norwalk, Connecticut.
Yeah, Norwalk, Connecticut was about 50 miles. And they took us the same amount of time. So, or 30 less miles uphill is a big difference.
And it's really frustrating, especially to your mental state, when you think you crested a hill and you turn the corner and there's another quarter mile of just, straight uphill to deal with. We also had a moment in Rhode Island where we were nearing the end of our trip. We're probably about 5 miles out from the hotel, and we came to a part of the directions where we were supposed to get on a bike trail. Unfortunately, the directions put us on this trail a mile early where it was still a horse trail. So we're making the decision to kind of venture off into this rough terrain in the middle of the woods at dusk, and I wasn't too sure about that. But we did it. We got a mile down into the horse trail to the point where there's a bridge that changed over to the bike trail, and we could see across this bridge just beautifully flat, arrow straight pavement, even on a slight downhill. And unfortunately, about 25 feet was as close as we got to that because the bridge was missing. So at that point, it's extremely dark, and now we have to make the decision to turn around. So there's no way we could kind of cross this little river.
Yeah, the directions took us to what we saw, what we thought was a bike path. It happened to be a dirt trail, had some ice on it, so we decided to try it. I kind of pushed Drew into trying out the trail.
He's forgetting to mention this was at dusk, when it's getting dark, and we're about to go right into the woods that we have no idea where we are. So
it was a straight line right where we needed to go, and to go around it would have added way too much time. But we start down this trail, and we had to walk the bike for a little while because it was too bumpy and icy. But we finally got to an open portion of the dirt trail, and we're going, and it's getting darker and darker. And then all of a sudden I slam on the brakes, and Drew's like, what are you doing? And I look ahead, and we have a really nice bike path up ahead, perfectly flat, downhill slope, looks great. But right in front of us, the bridge is out, and we couldn't get over to the bike path, so we had to turn around.
We had to walk the mile back through the scary dark woods, and luckily we found an exit point 3/4 of the way down that we were able to get our trail car to get us back on the right path. But it was like, I've never been in like a wooded area where I can't see houses that I wasn't already familiar with at night. We had some little miners, flashlights, little LED headlamps, but I mean, that only made you more paranoid because the more light you have, the more shadows you see. And if not, it makes it worse, So it was definitely not one of my favorite parts of that trip, so.
Riding through the snow was quite an experience. Visibility was minimal. I rode in the front for most of the ride. So I had the wind in my face, snow in my face. I tried multiple pairs of goggles and glasses, but nothing really worked. We tried keeping it in a straight line so that our back tire didn't slide out in the snow. Going down hills was scary, hitting ice patches, but we had our trail car behind us, kind of keeping traffic away from us. Well, when we arrived at Fenway Park, actually, in Philadelphia, we're used to the sports complex where it's kind of a grand entrance to the entire complex. But when we got to Fenway, it's just a city block in Boston. So we couldn't find a good place to enter. But we finally met up with our trail car. They had some official Winter Classic champagne, so we had a nice celebration when we got there.
Yeah, we actually missed the turn onto Yawkey Way. We traveled over 300 miles on a tandem bicycle to miss the final turn at Fenway, so we had to actually go about a half a block up, turn around, come back to actually, arrive. So that was kind of a little funny aside that we had happen.
Well, the actual game, the Flyers didn't win, but the experience was unforgettable. We biked 300 miles over 5 days and watched an outdoor hockey game. We took different things we were passionate about. The Blessed Sarnelli community is something we're very passionate about. The Flyers is something we're very passionate about. We put them together to do something great. I wouldn't say we're passionate about bike riding, especially a tandem, but that kind of linked the two pieces together.
Yeah, I definitely don't think I'll be looking at a tandem bicycle ever again without some amount of anger towards it.
All of the proceeds from our trip went to a small nonprofit called the Blessed Sarnelli Community, based out of the Kensington section of Philadelphia. And their mission is to meet the needs of the poor and abandoned people of our city.
Currently they're rebuilding a house. They kind of use it as a home base, but they'll provide dinners, clothing, shower opportunities, any religious and career counseling that a person could use. So basically all the money that we raise is going to that organization. It's
an organization that I've been involved with since high school. And when I came to Drexel and met Drew, he came down and helped.
Well, I mean, even though we've done the bike trip, we're finished now, the organization that we're raising money for, never stops working. We still have our website up with ways to donate. You can go to broadstreetbikers.webs.com, and there's a donate page right on the main menu, which is BROADSTREET bikers.webs.com.